I thought I was dating a struggling international student who worked part-time at a coffee shop. Then a fleet of black SUVs pulled up to our apartment. Men in suits bowed deeply, and someone called him, "Your Royal Highness." My broke boyfriend? He was the crown prince of Korea's royal family, and he'd been lying to me for 6 months. His name was Jae-won. Or at least, that's what he told me. What he didn't tell me was that back in Seoul, his father ruled over one of the world's most respected royal families. That the hoodie with the hole in the sleeve was deliberately chosen. That counting out quarters for coffee was an act. That the struggling student who ate ramen and worked double shifts at a car wash was actually worth more money than I could comprehend, and I fell for all of it. I fell for him. This is the story of how a prince gave up his throne, his title, and everything he'd ever known just to find out if someone could love him for who he really was, not what he represented. This is the story of the greatest deception I've ever experienced, and somehow, the most honest love I've ever known. Before we dive into this impossible love story, if you're already hooked and want to see where this goes, show some love by hitting that hype button right below the like button. It helps more people discover stories like this, and trust me, you'll want your friends to experience this journey too. Now, let's get back to the moment my ordinary life collided with royalty disguised as poverty. September in Seattle meant rain. Constant, drizzling, soul-dampening rain that made the city feel like it existed in a perpetual state of melancholy. I loved it. There was something honest about rain. It didn't pretend to be anything other than what it was. Unlike some people. I was working the afternoon shift at Brewed Awakening, a small coffee shop in the university district that survived purely because of its proximity to campus and the fact that our coffee was marginally better than the corporate chain 2 blocks away. The place smelled like espresso and old books. We had a wall of donated paperbacks that customers could take or trade, and the furniture was an eclectic mix of garage sale finds that somehow worked together. It was my favorite place in the world. Simple, authentic, unpretentious. I was wiping down the counter, my dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing my standard uniform of jeans and the shop's forest green apron, when the bell above the door chimed. He walked in, and I swear the energy in the room shifted. He was tall, easily 6 feet, with the kind of face that belonged in a Korean drama. Sharp jawline, intense dark eyes, perfectly proportioned features that seemed almost sculpted. His black hair was slightly damp from the rain, falling across his forehead in a way that should have looked messy but instead looked effortlessly attractive. But it was his clothes that caught my attention. A faded gray hoodie with a visible hole near the left cuff. Jeans that had seen better days. Worn sneakers that were clean but clearly old. A backpack that looked like it had survived multiple academic years. He looked like every other struggling college student I served daily. Except he didn't. There was something about the way he carried himself, a natural grace, a quiet confidence that contradicted the shabby clothes. He moved through the space like he owned it, yet his eyes held a careful watchfulness, as if he was studying everything and everyone. "Hi, welcome to Brood Awakening," I said, giving him my standard friendly smile. "What can I get you?" He approached the counter and I caught a subtle scent, something expensive and clean, completely at odds with his appearance. His eyes met mine, and I felt an unexpected jolt. They were intelligent eyes, deep and assessing, but there was also something guarded about them. "Black coffee?" he said. His voice was smooth, with a Korean accent that hadn't been completely smoothed over by American English. "Small, please. Just black? No room for cream or anything? Just black." A small smile touched his lips. "I prefer things simple." I rang him up. "That'll be $2.50. He pulled out a worn leather wallet, the one expensive-looking thing he carried, and carefully counted out exact change. $2, 2 quarters. He placed the coins on the counter with deliberate precision, as if this transaction mattered deeply to him. It was such a small thing, but it struck me. Most students, even broke ones, didn't count out exact change like that. They usually just handed over bills and stuffed the change in their pockets, without thinking about it. "Starting your day or ending it?" I asked as I poured his coffee, making small talk the way I did with all customers. "Ending," he replied. "I work mornings at a car wash, then I have classes, then I study at the library. Coffee helps with the last part. Rough schedule. It's what I need to do. He said it matter-of-factly, without complaint. But I'm an international student. Tuition doesn't pay itself. I handed him the coffee. What are you studying? Political science and international relations. That small smile again. Perhaps, ironically. Why, ironically? He wrapped his hands around the cup, as if savoring the warmth. Let's just say I'm more familiar with politics than I'd like to be. Before I could ask what he meant, another customer walked in, and he took that as his cue to leave. He nodded politely, almost a small bow, and headed to a corner table by the window. I served the next customer, but my attention kept drifting to the corner. He had pulled out a laptop, an older model I noticed, and was typing intently, occasionally sipping his coffee. The rain streaked down the window beside him, and the gray afternoon light cast his profile in shadow. There was something about him. Something that didn't quite add up. But Seattle was full of interesting people with untold stories. I figured he was just another one. I had no idea I was looking at royalty. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that 3 months earlier and 7,000 miles away, in the Grand Palace of Seoul, a confrontation was taking place that would change both our lives forever. Crown Prince Jaewon Hyun-soo stood in his father's private study, rain lashing against the ornate windows. Even Korea was drowning in rain that day. He faced down King Hyun-soo Dae-jung with a defiance that shocked everyone present. "I will not marry Lady Seo-yeon," Jaewon said, his voice steady despite the enormity of what he was refusing. "I will not enter into an arranged marriage with someone I've met exactly 4 times, always under the watchful eyes of advisors and photographers." The king's face remained impassive, but his eyes flashed with anger. He was a man accustomed to absolute obedience, especially from his son and heir. "This isn't a request, Jaewon. This is your duty. Lady Seoyeon comes from an impeccable family. The alliance strengthens our position. The public adores her. The marriage has already been announced. Then unannounce it. You forget yourself." The king's voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. "You forget what you are." "I forget nothing, father." Jaewon stepped forward. "I am painfully aware of what I am. I've been aware every single day of my life. I'm a symbol, a title, a carefully constructed public image. I'm the crown prince who smiles for cameras and attends state functions and gives speeches written by other people about values I'm supposed to embody. You speak as if this is a burden. It is a burden when it comes with no choice, no autonomy, no chance to discover who I actually am beneath all the expectations." Jaewon's composure cracked slightly, emotion bleeding through. "I'm 26 years old, and I've never made a single significant decision about my own life. Everything has been decided for me. Where I go to school, what I study, who I spend time with, and now, who I marry." The queen, who had been silent until now, spoke softly from her chair near the window. "Jaewon, love can grow from respect and shared purpose. Your father and we're also an arranged marriage, I know." Jaewon turned to his mother, his expression softening. "And you've made it work. You've built something real from a political arrangement. I respect that, mother. I truly do. But I will not, enter into marriage without knowing if someone can love me for who I am, not what I represent." "And who are you exactly?" the king challenged. "Strip away the title, the palace, the privilege. What remains? You've never existed without these things. You have no idea who you are outside this context?" "Exactly." Jaewon met his father's eyes. "And that's precisely why I need to find out." Silence fell over the study. Rain continued its assault on the windows. The king stood, walking to the window to look out at the palace grounds, his hands clasped behind his back. "You want to refuse this marriage?" he finally said. "You want to discover yourself. And you want to know if someone can love you without knowing your title." "Yes." "Then here is my counteroffer." The king turned back to face his son. 1 year. I'll give you 1 year to find this authentic love you seek. But there are conditions." Jaewon waited, hardly daring to breathe. "You will go to America. You will live as an ordinary person, no title, no wealth, no security detail. You'll work, study if you wish, and live on a budget equivalent to what a working international student might have. You will tell no one who you really are. I accept. I'm not finished. The king's expression hardened. If, after 1 year, you haven't found this true love you're seeking, or if you have found it but it falls apart when she discovers the truth, you will return home, marry Lady Seoyeon without protest, and never question your duties again. Yen furthermore, any woman you find must pass the ultimate test. She must love you when you're poor, and she must still choose you when she discovers your royalty. Both truths. If she cannot accept both versions of who you are, then this experiment has failed, and you will honor your commitment to Lady Seoyeon. Jaewon's jaw tightened. And if I succeed? If I find someone who loves both versions of me? Then I will dissolve the arrangement with Lady Seoyeon, and you may marry whomever you choose. The king paused. But know this, my son. You will be utterly alone in America. No guards watching from the shadows. No handlers managing your image. No safety net if things go wrong. You will succeed or fail entirely on your own merits, on who you are as a man, not as a prince. Are you truly prepared for that? Jaewon straightened his shoulders. I am. Very well. The king returned to his desk, pulling out official documents. You'll leave in 2 weeks. We'll announce that the crown prince is taking a sabbatical for personal growth and academic pursuits abroad. You'll have an apartment arranged, a student visa, and a monthly stipend of $1,500. That's what we've determined an international student working part-time might reasonably have. Nothing more. $1,500. Jaewon almost laughed. He'd spent more than that on a single dinner before. You'll need to find work to supplement your expenses if you want anything beyond basic survival, the king continued. You'll need to budget, to choose between necessities. You'll experience what 99% of the world experiences daily. Financial pressure, uncertainty, the weight of bills and obligations. And I understand. Do you? The king's eyes softened slightly, and for a moment, he was simply a father looking at his son. Do you understand that you might fail? That you might discover that without your title and wealth, you're not as remarkable as you think? That the woman you find might choose to walk away when she discovers the magnitude of your deception? Then I'll have my answer, won't I? Jaewon said quietly. I'll know that what I had to offer wasn't enough. And I'll come home and fulfill my duty. The queen stood, approaching her son. She placed a hand on his cheek. You've always been enough, Jaewon. Title or no title. I just hope this journey helps you see that. 3 weeks later, Jaewon stepped off a plane at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, wearing jeans and a hoodie he'd purchased specifically for this journey. In his backpack was a change of clothes, a laptop, and a folder containing his new identity documents. In his wallet was $750 in cash, half of his first month's stipend. The other half had already gone to his first month's rent on a studio apartment in the University District. No one bowed. No one called him Your Highness. No one recognized him at all. For the first time in his life, Crown Prince Jaewon Hyunsu was completely, utterly anonymous. And he had never felt more terrified, or more free. Back at Brood Awakening, Jaewon became a regular. Every afternoon around 3:30 he'd walk through that door, order his small black coffee, count out exact change, and settle into his corner table by the window. And every afternoon, I found myself watching him a little more closely. He intrigued me. Most of our regular customers were chattier, eager to fill the silence with small talk or complaints about professors or excited chatter about weekend plans. Jaewon was different. He was polite, even warm, but there was a careful reserve about him, as if he was constantly monitoring what he revealed. It took 2 weeks before we had a conversation that lasted longer than the transaction itself. It was a Thursday, unusually slow for an afternoon. The rain had intensified into a proper storm, the kind that kept people indoors rather than venturing out for coffee. I was restocking cups when Jaewon walked in, absolutely drenched despite carrying an umbrella. Rough day? I asked as he approached the counter. The wind had other plans for my umbrella, he said, shaking water from his hair. It's now in several pieces in a trash can 2 blocks away. I laughed. Let me get you something warm. On the house. His eyebrows rose. On the house? You look like you need it. And we're dead today anyway. My manager won't care. That's very kind, but I can pay. I'm already pouring it. I filled a large cup instead of his usual small. Just accept the random act of kindness, okay? He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his entire face. It was like watching the sun break through storm clouds. Thank you. Truly. You're welcome. I slid the coffee across the counter. I'm Maya, by the way. I realized I've been serving you for 2 weeks and never actually introduced myself. Jaewon. He took the coffee, wrapping both hands around it. It's nice to properly meet you, Maya. So what brings you to Seattle? I leaned against the counter, genuinely curious. Besides the excellent coffee and constant rain? He laughed softly. I needed a change. Something completely different from what I knew. Seattle seemed far enough away from my old life to truly start fresh. Where's your old life? Seoul? He said it carefully, as if testing how much to reveal. I grew up there. Very traditional family. Very specific expectations about who I should be and what I should do with my life. Let me guess. They wanted you to be a doctor? Or a lawyer? Something like that. His eyes held a hint of amusement. They had very detailed plans for my future. Every step mapped out from birth to death. I just wanted 1 year to figure out who I was outside of those plans. So you came to America? So I came to America. To work at a car wash and drink cheap coffee and figure out what I actually want from life. And? What have you figured out so far? He considered this, his dark eyes studying me with an intensity that made my heart skip. I've figured out that freedom is both terrifying and exhilarating. That earning money through your own labor feels different than money you're simply given. That most people are kind when you have nothing to offer them but basic courtesy. He paused. And that the barista at my favorite coffee shop makes even rainy days feel a little warmer. I felt heat rise to my cheeks. That's quite a list of discoveries. I'm a work in progress. Aren't we all? From that conversation forward, something shifted between us. What had been polite customer-server exchanges became genuine conversations. I learned that he was taking night classes at the community college, working toward eventually transferring to the University of Washington. In that he worked early mornings at a car wash in Ballard, which meant he was up at 5 a.m. most days. That he'd never had American pizza before moving here, and was simultaneously horrified and delighted by the concept. He learned that I was 24, had graduated with a degree in English literature that I had no idea what to do with, and was working at Brood Awakening while I figured out my next steps. That I'd grown up in a small town in Oregon and had moved to Seattle 3 years ago chasing a relationship that had spectacularly imploded. That I wrote poetry in the margins of my order notebooks when things were slow. The conversation started at the counter and gradually migrated to his corner table. On slow days, I'd take my break and sit with him, our coffee cups side by side, our rain streaming down the windows while we talked about everything and nothing. I told myself it was just friendly conversation, that I was simply being nice to a regular customer who seemed isolated and far from home. I was lying to myself. I was falling for him. It wasn't just his looks, though I'd be lying if I said I didn't notice how attractive he was. It was the way he listened, giving me his complete attention as if my rambling thoughts about poetry or my complaints about difficult customers were the most fascinating things he'd ever heard. It was his quiet humor, the dry observations that caught me off guard and made me laugh. It was the gentleness in him, the way he thanked me for every coffee as if I'd done something remarkable rather than simply pouring a drink. It was the moments when his careful reserve slipped and I caught glimpses of something deeper. A loneliness that mirrored my own. A searching quality, as if he was trying to figure out how to be a person rather than a role. 6 weeks after our first conversation, he asked me out. It was a Friday evening, nearly closing time. The shop was empty except for the two of us. I was wiping down tables, and he was packing up his laptop. Maya, he said, and something in his tone made me look up. Yeah? Would you? He paused, and I saw uncertainty flicker across his face, an expression I'd never seen from him before. Would you want to get dinner sometime? With me? Not here, somewhere else, as, not a customer and server, but as a date? I finished, my heart hammering. Yes, a date. If you're interested. If you're not, that's completely fine. I don't want to make things awkward, I'd love to, I interrupted, smiling. I'd really love to. The relief on his face was palpable. Really? Really? Though I have to warn you, my standards are very high. You'll have to take me somewhere with food that costs more than $3. He laughed. I think I can manage that. Tomorrow? 7? Tomorrow at 7. I paused. Should I meet you somewhere, or I'll pick you up, if you're comfortable giving me your address? I wrote it down on a napkin, and he tucked it carefully into his wallet, that same worn leather wallet he always used. I'll see you tomorrow then, he said, and the smile he gave me was so genuine, so full of anticipation, that I felt my stomach flip. See you tomorrow, J1. After he left, I stood in the empty coffee shop, napkin and rag still in my hands, and tried to process what had just happened. I had a date with the most intriguing man I'd met in years, the man who counted quarters and wore hoodies with holes and somehow made a corner table in a coffee shop feel like the most interesting place in the world. I had no idea I'd just agreed to date royalty. What I also didn't know was that in Seoul, in a palace I'd never seen, Jaewon's parents were receiving weekly reports on their son's progress. Not from guards or handlers. Jaewon truly was alone, but from the bank that administered his stipend. They could see his transactions, the car wash that paid him minimum wage, the rent on a tiny studio apartment, the groceries from discount stores, the community college tuition, and now, a charge at a modest Italian restaurant in the university district. And the queen smiled when she saw that transaction. He's found someone, she said to the king. Or he's simply having dinner, the king replied, but there was curiosity in his tone. Our son has eaten instant ramen for 6 weeks straight based on these grocery purchases. Now he's spending money at a real restaurant. He's found someone. The king studied the reports. We'll see if she's worth it. We'll see if he's worth it. Without the crown. In my small apartment, I was tearing through my closet trying to find something to wear. What did you wear on a date with someone you'd only ever seen in casual clothes? How dressy was too dressy? How casual was too casual? I finally settled on a simple black dress. Not too formal, not too casual, paired with a denim jacket and ankle boots. I left my hair down, did my makeup carefully but naturally, and tried to calm my nerves. At 6:55, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Jaewon standing there in dark jeans and a button-down shirt, the nicest clothes I'd seen him wear. He'd styled his hair, and he looked unfairly handsome. In his hands was a small bouquet of flowers, nothing expensive or elaborate, just a simple bunch of daisies. Hi, he said, and I caught a hint of nervousness in his voice that made him even more endearing. Hi. I took the flowers, genuinely touched. These are beautiful. You didn't have to. I wanted to. He paused. You look incredible. You clean up pretty well yourself. He smiled. Ready? Ready. He didn't have a car. He'd mentioned once that he took the bus everywhere, so we walked to the restaurant. It was only about 6 blocks, and the evening was clear for once, the rain having taken a temporary break. Seattle spread out around us in all its urban, eclectic glory, the streets busy with Friday night energy. We talked as we walked, the conversation flowing easily despite my nerves. He asked about my poetry, whether I'd ever tried to publish anything. I asked about his classes, what he was finding most challenging about American education. The restaurant was a small Italian place, family-owned, with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. It was perfect, cozy, and intimate without being pretentious. Over pasta and wine, we talked for hours. The conversation deepened in ways our coffee shop exchanges hadn't quite reached. He told me about growing up in Seoul, carefully editing out any details that might reveal his true identity, but conveying the pressure of familial expectations, the weight of living a life designed by others. I felt like I was playing a role, he said, twirling pasta on his fork. Every action, every word, every choice was scrutinized. There was a right way to be, and I was expected to conform to it perfectly. No room for mistakes. No room for authenticity. That sounds exhausting. It was. He met my eyes. That's why this, being here, being just Jaewon without any context or expectations, it feels like breathing for the first time. Is that why you don't talk much about your family? I asked gently. Because it's complicated? Yes. His expression grew distant. I love them, but I needed distance to figure out who I am separate from who they need me to be. Does that make sense? Complete sense. I reached across the table, touching his hand. And we all need to find ourselves outside of other people's expectations. His hand turned, his fingers intertwining with mine. What about you? Who are you, Maya, outside of everyone else's expectations? I'm still figuring that out, I admitted. I thought I had it all mapped out. College, career, relationship, the standard progression. But life had other plans. My relationship ended badly. My degree didn't lead to the career I expected. And I ended up serving coffee while I try to figure out what comes next. That doesn't sound like failure. That sounds like someone brave enough to admit when the map they're following isn't leading where they want to go. You're very kind. I'm honest. He squeezed my hand. I think you're exactly where you need to be, even if you can't see the destination yet. We stayed until the restaurant was nearly empty. He ate until the servers were giving us polite looks that suggested they'd like to close. Jaewon paid the bill, and I noticed him count out cash carefully, leaving a generous tip despite clearly watching his budget. We walked back to my apartment slowly, neither of us ready for the evening to end. The city lights reflected off wet pavement from an earlier shower we'd missed while inside. The air smelled clean and fresh. At my door, we stood in the hallway, the moment stretching between us. I had a really wonderful time, he said softly. Me too. Could we do this again? I'd like that very much. He stepped closer, and I could see the question in his eyes. I answered by rising slightly on my toes, closing the distance between us. The kiss was gentle, tentative, perfect. His hand came up to cup my cheek, and I felt the careful tenderness in the gesture. When we pulled apart, we were both smiling. Good night, Maya. Good night, Jaewon. I watched him walk down the hallway, and he turned back once to wave before disappearing around the corner. I went inside my apartment, touching my lips, feeling like I was floating. I had no idea that the man I'd just kissed was worth billions, that he lived in a palace, that his face was known to millions. I just knew that I was falling in love with someone who felt real and honest and true. And he was falling for me too, but with a terror I couldn't comprehend. Because every moment we grew closer, every genuine connection we built, made the eventual revelation of his deception more devastating. In his tiny studio apartment, Jaewon sat on the edge of his narrow bed, head in his hands. He'd kissed me. He'd taken this from a hypothetical experiment to something real. And with every fiber of his being, he knew he was doing something profoundly unfair. But he couldn't stop. Because for the first time in his life, someone was seeing him. Really seeing him. Not the title or the wealth or the image, but the man beneath it all. And that feeling was more intoxicating than anything he'd ever experienced. We fell into a relationship that felt easy and natural, despite the underlying deception I knew nothing about. Over the next 2 months, Jaewon and I saw each other several times a week. We'd meet after his shifts at the car wash or my shifts at the coffee shop. We explored Seattle together on our days off, finding free or cheap activities that fit his supposed budget. We hiked in Discovery Park, spent hours in the Seattle Public Library, or browsed Pike Place Market and found hole-in-the-wall restaurants that served incredible food for reasonable prices. We had picnics in Volunteer Park when the weather permitted. We went to free concerts and art gallery openings. We watched sunsets over Puget Sound and talked until the stars came out. He was different from anyone I'd ever dated. More thoughtful, more intentional. He listened like listening was an art form. He remembered tiny details I mentioned in passing, a poet I admired, a food I disliked, a memory from childhood. He was affectionate but never presumptuous, always asking before initiating physical intimacy, always making sure I was comfortable. But there were moments that confused me. Small things that didn't quite fit the image of a struggling international student. The way he moved. And with a grace that spoke of expensive training in something, dance maybe, or martial arts. The way he held doors, pulled out chairs, small gestures of formal courtesy that seemed ingrained rather than learned. His vocabulary was extensive, his references sophisticated. He knew about wine, about art, about classical music, knowledge that seemed at odds with someone who supposedly grew up in modest circumstances. Once, we were walking past a high-end restaurant, the kind with a months-long waiting list and entrees that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I made a joke about never being able to afford eating there. Jaewon had stopped, looking at the menu posted outside with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Have you ever eaten at a place like this?" I asked, curious about his expression. "Once," he said quietly. "A long time ago. For a special occasion?" "What was it like?" He was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, the food was incredible, but the experience felt hollow. Everyone was performing, trying to be seen in the right place with the right people. I think I'd rather have cheap pizza with someone I actually care about." He'd pulled me close then, kissing my forehead, and I'd melted into him, dismissing my momentary confusion. There were other moments, too. Once, his phone rang while we were having coffee. He'd glanced at the screen, and his entire body had tensed. He'd excused himself, taking the call outside. Through the window, I could see him, his posture rigid, his expression severe in a way I'd never seen before. He'd spoken for maybe 2 minutes, then ended the call and stood in the rain for a long moment before coming back inside. "Everything okay?" I'd asked. "Just my father," he'd said, his voice tight, checking in. "He has very specific ideas about how I should be living my life. You don't sound happy about it." "I'm not. But it's complicated." I'd let it drop, sensing he didn't want to discuss it, but I'd filed away the observation. His father had money for international calls and apparently strong opinions. That didn't quite match the story of a student struggling to make ends meet. But I pushed my doubts aside. I was falling in love, and people in love want to believe the best about the object of their affection. Besides, maybe his family had money, but he'd chosen to live modestly. Maybe he was estranged from wealth. There were plenty of explanations. 3 months into our relationship, Jaewon invited me to his apartment for the first time. "It's not much," he'd warned. "Really not much. I don't want you to be disappointed." "I won't be disappointed," I'd assured him. "I just want to spend time with you." His studio was in an older building in the university district, up 3 flights of narrow stairs. The apartment itself was tiny, maybe 300 square feet total. A narrow bed in one corner, a small desk and chair, a kitchenette with a 2-burner stove and a mini fridge. A door that led to a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in, but it was meticulously clean and thoughtfully arranged. Books were stacked neatly on the desk. The bed was made with precision. A small plant sat on the windowsill. There were no decorations, no personal photos, nothing that revealed anything about who he really was. "Home sweet home," he said, watching my face carefully for my reaction. "It's perfect," I said honestly. "It's you. Clean, organized, intentional." He relaxed visibly. "I know it's small. I don't care about the size." I sat on the edge of his bed, the only real seating besides the desk chair. "You've made it a home." He sat beside me, and we were quiet for a moment, the intimacy of being in his personal space creating a new level of closeness between us. "Maya," he said softly, "I need you to know that these past few months with you have been the happiest of my life. Mine too. I mean it." His dark eyes were intense, searching mine. "You've given me something I didn't know I needed. You've seen me, the real me, not the version I'm supposed to be or the role I'm supposed to play. Just me. And you've chosen me anyway." "Of course I have." I touched his face. "You're an incredible person, Jaewon." He kissed me then, deep and passionate, and we fell back onto his narrow bed, wrapped in each other. We made love for the first time in that tiny studio apartment, in that narrow bed, with rain pattering against the window and the sounds of the city muted and distant. Afterward, lying tangled together in sheets that smelled like cheap detergent and him, I felt completely at peace. "I love you," I whispered, saying it for the first time. He went very still, then his arms tightened around me. "I love you too," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "More than you know, more than I can express." What I didn't hear was the rest of that thought, the part he kept silent. "I love you too much to keep lying to you. But I'm too terrified of losing you to tell you the truth." In Seoul, the king was reviewing the latest report on his son. 4 months in America. Stable relationship with one woman, a barista named Maya Chen. No extravagant purchases. Still working at the car wash. Still living within his limited budget. He's serious about her, the Queen observed. He's never stayed with anyone this long. Or he's simply committed to winning this challenge, the King replied. We won't know his true feelings until she knows the truth. When will you tell him it's time? The King considered. 6 months. That was always the plan. He has 6 months to build something real, then 6 months to see if it survives the truth. We'll inform him next month that the revelation must happen at the 6-month mark, and if she can't handle the truth, then he comes home, marries Lady Seoyeon, and learns an important lesson about the difference between fantasy and reality. You're very cold about this. I'm practical. The King's expression softened slightly. And I don't want to see our son hurt. But he needs to understand that being crown prince isn't something you can simply set aside. It's who he is, title and all. If this woman truly loves him, she'll accept all of him, including his responsibilities. If she doesn't, better to know now. Back in Seattle, Jae-won was struggling with the exact same realization. He'd received an encrypted message from his father's office that morning. A reminder that his 6-month mark was approaching. Instructions that he must reveal his true identity to me no later than the 6-month anniversary of our first date. 1 month. He had 1 more month of this perfect, simple, honest relationship before he destroyed it with the truth. He watched me sleep in his narrow bed, the early morning light filtering through cheap curtains. I was beautiful in my simplicity, my hair tangled on his pillow, my face peaceful. I'd chosen him when he had nothing to offer but himself. I'd fallen in love with a poor student who worked at a car wash and counted quarters. Would I still love him when I discovered he was one of the wealthiest men in Asia? When I learned that every financial struggle had been theater? When I realized the magnitude of his deception? He didn't know. And the not knowing was destroying him. That morning, I woke to find him sitting on the edge of the bed, fully dressed, staring out the window. Hey, I said sleepily, come back to bed. He turned to look at me, and there was something in his expression that made my stomach clench. A sorrow, a conflict. What's wrong? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he shook his head. Nothing. Just thinking about how lucky I am. You're being weird. I sat up, pulling the sheet around me. Talk to me. He came back to the bed, pulling me into his arms. I'm fine. I promise. Just having one of those moments where I'm overwhelmed by how much I care about you. I relaxed into him. You scared me for a second. I'm sorry. He kissed the top of my head. I don't mean to scare you. Ever. But he was scared. Terrified. Because in 1 month, he'd have to tell me everything, and there was a very real chance that this, us, the best thing that had ever happened to him, would shatter into pieces. The next month passed in a bittersweet blur. Jae-won became more intense, more present, as if he was trying to memorize every moment. He'd look at me sometimes with such longing, such sadness, that I'd ask if everything was okay. He'd always smile and assure me it was, but I could feel something shifting, and I attributed it to stress. His father had been calling more frequently, and the conversations always left Jae-won tense and withdrawn. I figured there was family drama, pressure for him to return home, expectations he was trying to resist. I had no idea the truth was so much more complicated. Our 6-month anniversary fell on a Saturday. Jae-won had been planning something special, though he was cagey about the details. All he'd told me was to dress nice and be ready by 6. I chose a dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion, deep blue, fitted, elegant. I did my hair and makeup carefully, wanting to look beautiful for him. When he arrived at my door, he took my breath away. He was wearing a suit, an actual suit, perfectly tailored, clearly expensive. It was the first time I'd seen him in anything remotely formal, and the transformation was startling. He looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine, sophisticated and elegant and heartbreakingly handsome. Wow, I said. Look at you. His smile was strained. I wanted tonight to be special. I borrowed the suit from a friend. It looks amazing on you. I touched his lapel. Very James Bond. Hardly. He offered his arm. Ready? Ready. A car was waiting outside. Not a taxi or an Uber, but an actual town car with a driver. I looked at Jaewon in confusion. Also borrowed, he said quickly. My friend is being very generous tonight. Some friend. Yes. His voice was tight. Some friend. The driver took us to the Columbia Tower, Seattle's tallest building. We rode the elevator to the top, to a restaurant I'd only read about. I'm the kind of place that required reservations months in advance and had a dress code and prices that made my coffee shop salary look like pocket change. Jaewon, I whispered, as we were led to a table by the window with a stunning view of the city. This is too much. How did you even afford— Tonight is special, he interrupted. Please, let me give you this. There was something desperate in his tone, something that stopped my protest. Okay. Thank you. This is incredible. Dinner was extraordinary. Multiple courses, each more delicious than the last. Wine that probably cost more than my rent. Service so attentive it was almost uncomfortable. And through it all, Jaewon watched me with those intense dark eyes, looking at me like he was memorizing my face. You're being weird again, I finally said, halfway through the main course. Well, you've been looking at me like you're trying to burn my image into your brain. Maybe I am. Why? He set down his fork, reaching across the table to take my hand. Maya, I need to tell you something. Something important. Something that might change everything between us. My heart started hammering. Okay. You're kind of scaring me. I don't mean to scare you. He took a deep breath. But I haven't been completely honest with you. There are things about my life, about who I am, that I haven't told you. Things I've actively hidden. What kind of things? Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and all color drained from his face. I have to take this, he said, standing abruptly. I'm sorry. I'll be right back. Please, wait here. He walked quickly toward the restrooms, phone pressed to his ear. Through the window's reflection, and I could see him, his posture rigid, his free hand clenched into a fist. Something was very wrong. I sat there, my beautiful dinner growing cold, my mind racing. What could he possibly need to tell me? Was he married? Did he have a child? Was he sick? 10 minutes passed, then 15. I was starting to genuinely worry when Jaewon finally returned to the table. He looked shaken, pale, his carefully controlled composure cracked. We need to leave, he said, his voice hollow. Now. What? Why? What happened? Please. He was already signaling for the check. Trust me. We need to go. The ride back to my apartment was silent and tense. Jaewon stared out the window, jaw clenched, refusing to meet my eyes. I sat beside him, confused and increasingly upset. At my door, I finally confronted him. What the hell is going on? You drag me to this incredible restaurant, tell me you need to confess something, then get a phone call and completely shut down. I deserve an explanation, Jaewon. You're right. He ran a hand through his hair, destroying its careful styling. You deserve so much more than an explanation. You deserve the truth. All of it. Then tell me. He looked at me for a long moment, conflict warring in his expression. Tomorrow. Come to my apartment tomorrow at noon. I'll tell you everything then. I promise. Why not now? Because I need time to figure out how to say it. And because once I tell you, everything changes. Everything. So I'm asking for one more night. One more night where things are simple and good between us. Please. I wanted to push. I wanted to demand answers immediately. But the anguish in his eyes stopped me. Okay. Tomorrow at noon. But Jaewon, whatever it is, we'll figure it out together. Maybe. His smile was heartbreaking. Or maybe you'll never want to see me again. He kissed me then, deep and desperate, like he was drowning and I was air. Then he was gone, disappearing down the hallway before I could say another word. I went inside my apartment, threw my expensive dress on the floor, and tried to sleep. I failed. My mind spun through possibilities, each more upsetting than the last. What I didn't know was that the phone call Jaewon had received was from his father's personal secretary. There had been a security breach. A Korean tabloid journalist had somehow discovered that Crown Prince Jaewon was in Seattle. They didn't have his exact location yet, but they were looking. The palace was scrambling to contain the situation, but it was only a matter of time before I discovered the truth. The king had given Jaewon a direct order. Tell her tonight, or the palace would release an official statement tomorrow that would reveal everything in the most public, humiliating way possible. Jaewon had one day. One day to find the words to tell the woman he loved that their entire relationship was built on a lie. In his studio apartment, he sat on his narrow bed and wrote pages and pages, trying to explain the inexplicable, trying to make me understand why he'd done what he did, trying to convince me that despite the deception, his feelings were real. As dawn broke over Seattle, he was still writing, knowing that in a few hours, the best thing that had ever happened to him would likely end. I arrived at Jaewon's apartment at exactly noon, having barely slept, and I'd gone through every possible scenario in my mind. None of them had prepared me for the truth. He opened the door, looking as exhausted as I felt. His eyes were red-rimmed, his hair uncombed. He was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt, looking more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. "Come in," he said quietly. I stepped into the familiar studio apartment, but something felt different. There were papers scattered across the desk. His laptop was open, showing what looked like news articles in Korean. "Sit, please." He gestured to the bed. I sat, and he sat beside me, leaving a small space between us. "I don't know how to start this," he said. "I've been trying to find the right words all night, and there aren't any, so I'm just going to say it. My real name is Jaewon Hyunsu. I am the Crown Prince of Korea. My father is King Hyunsu Daejong. Everything you think you know about me, about my life, my financial situation, my struggles, it's all been a lie." I stared at him. For a long moment, my brain simply couldn't process the words. They made no sense. Crown Prince, Korea, lie. What? He pulled out his phone, opening a browser, showing me article after article. Images of him in formal attire, wearing medals and sashes, standing beside people I vaguely recognized as foreign dignitaries. Headlines in Korean with English translations that referenced the Crown Prince. Royal functions, state visits. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice distant and strange. "This is insane. You're telling me you're royalty? Like actual royalty?" "Yes. But you work at a car wash. You count quarters. You live in this—" I gestured around the tiny studio. "This apartment that barely has room for a bed." "I know." He set the phone down. 6 months ago, I refused an arranged marriage. My father offered me a deal. 1 year to live as an ordinary person in America, to find love based on who I am rather than my title. If I succeeded, if I found someone who could love me both as a poor student and as a prince, I could marry whomever I chose. If I failed, I'd return home and fulfill my duty to marry the woman my family had selected. "You've been pretending." My voice was rising. "For 6 months, you've been lying to me. Every story about struggling financially, every time you counted change, every moment you made me feel like we were in this together, navigating life on a budget, it was all performance?" The financial struggle was real in its way. I genuinely only had $1,500 a month. I genuinely worked at the car wash because I needed more money. The constraints were real, even if the underlying circumstances weren't. "Don't." I stood up, needing distance. "Don't you dare try to minimize this. You lied to me, Jaewon. About everything fundamental. About who you are, where you come from, your entire life." "I know." "Why?" I turned to face him, tears streaming down my face. "Why would you do this to me? Did you think it was funny? Did you enjoy watching me worry about you being able to afford rent? Did you laugh when I insisted on paying for dates because I knew you were broke?" He stood, reaching for me, but I backed away. "I never laughed." His voice broke. "Maya, I fell in love with you. Real love. The kind I've never experienced before. You saw me, really saw me, when I was just a guy in a coffee shop. You chose me when I had nothing to offer but myself. You gave me something I never had, genuine connection based on who I am as a person, not my title or wealth. So you thought the appropriate response was to lie to me for 6 months? I thought—" He stopped, running his hands through his hair. "I don't know what I thought. I was terrified that if you knew the truth, you'd treat me differently, that you'd see the crown instead of the man. And the longer it went on, the harder it became to tell you. Because I knew that when I did, I'd lose you. You're damn right you'll lose me. Maya, please. No. I held up my hand. I need to think. I need to process this. I thought I was in love with a struggling student. I thought we were building something real and authentic. Now you're telling me that everything was a test? That I was an experiment to see if the poor girl could love the prince? It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Explain to me how this is anything other than a massive, cruel deception. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no answer because there was no good answer. I walked to the door. Maya, wait. Where are you going? Away from you. I need time to think. I need time to figure out if there's anything salvageable in this mess, or if the man I fell in love with never actually existed. He existed. He does exist. I'm still that person. Are you? Because the person I fell in love with was honest. The person I fell in love with shared his real self with me. You've been playing a role, Jaewon. Or should I call you Your Highness? Please don't. I left, walking down those 3 flights of stairs and out into the Seattle afternoon. The rain had returned, pouring down in sheets, and I walked through it without caring, letting it mix with my tears. Behind me, in that tiny studio apartment, Crown Prince Jaewon Hyun-soo sat on his narrow bed and finally allowed himself to break down completely. He'd known this moment would come. He'd prepared for it as best he could. But nothing could have prepared him for the look of betrayal in my eyes. Nothing could have prepared him for the pain of watching the woman he loved walk away. He'd gambled everything on the hope that love could transcend deception. And he'd lost. I didn't go home. I couldn't. Instead, I walked through the rain until I found myself at Brood Awakening. The shop was busy with the Saturday afternoon crowd, but my manager, Sarah, took one look at my soaked, devastated state and immediately pulled me into the back room. "What happened?" she demanded, wrapping me in a towel. The words tumbled out in a rush. The perfect boyfriend, the 6-month anniversary, the confession, the crown prince of Korea, the massive, elaborate deception. Sarah stared at me like I'd lost my mind. He's a what? A prince. Actual royalty. His father is the king of Korea. This whole time, the struggling student thing was an act. That's insane. Tell me about it. Sarah made me tea, forced me to sit, and listened as I poured out the entire story. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Okay," she finally said. "So he lied. That's undeniable. But Maya, playing devil's advocate here, can you understand why?" "No," I erupted. "How can you possibly defend this?" "I'm not defending it. I'm saying I can see how it happened." She leaned forward. "Think about it from his perspective. He's famous, wealthy, powerful. Everyone who approaches him wants something from him or sees the title first and the person second. He comes here to find someone who will love him for himself, and he meets you. And you do love him for himself, for who he is as a person. How does he tell you the truth without changing that dynamic? He tells me from the beginning. He trusts me. Does he? You just met him." Sarah shook her head. "Look, I'm not saying he handled this well. He clearly didn't. But I don't think he did it maliciously. I think he did it because he was scared. He should have been scared. Because this is exactly what happens when you build a relationship on lies." "Is the relationship built on lies, though?" Sarah challenged. "Or just the circumstances? Because from what you've told me, his feelings were real. The conversations you had, the connection you built, that was genuine, wasn't it?" "I don't know." I pressed my hands to my face. "I don't know what was real and what was performance. Has he ever treated you poorly? Has he been manipulative or controlling? Has he pressured you or made you feel unsafe?" "No," I admitted. "He's been nothing but kind and respectful. So the person you fell in love with is who he actually is. The only thing that's changed is you now know he has money and a title." "Everything has changed, Sarah. He's not who I thought he was." "Isn't he, though?" She touched my arm gently. "You fell in love with a guy who worked hard, who valued simple things, who listened to you and saw you and treated you with respect. Does it matter that he was doing it while secretly wealthy? Yes, because it means he didn't trust me. It means he thought I was so shallow that I couldn't handle knowing the truth. Or it means he's been hurt before by people who only cared about his status. She paused. I'm not saying you should forgive him. I'm saying maybe there's more nuance here than you're currently able to see. I sat with that, sipping my tea, trying to think through the fury and hurt. What do I do? I finally asked. What do you want to do? I want to never see him again. I want to pretend the last 6 months didn't happen. I want to rewind to before I met him and warn myself not to fall for the beautiful stranger in the coffee shop. But I also love him. Despite everything, I love him. And that makes me so angry I can barely breathe. Sarah smiled sadly. Love is complicated, and this situation is about as complicated as it gets. That we sat in silence for a while. Outside, rain continued to fall. Inside, I tried to figure out if the man I loved still existed, or if he'd been a fairy tale all along. Meanwhile, in his apartment, Jae-won was fielding calls from Seoul. The tabloid story had broken. Crown Prince spotted in Seattle. Speculation about a romantic relationship. The palace was scrambling to control the narrative. His father called personally. The press knows, the king said without preamble. We need you to return immediately for damage control. No. This isn't optional, Jae-won. I'm not coming back. Jae-won's voice was steel. Not yet. You gave me a year. I'm using it. The deal was that you'd tell her the truth at 6 months. You've done that. The experiment is over. The experiment might be over, but my life isn't. I love her, father. And I'm not giving up without a fight. She walked out on you. Because I deserved it. Jae-won closed his eyes. But love doesn't end just because someone walks away in anger. She has every right to be furious. I lied to her. I broke her trust. If she never speaks to me again, I'll accept that. But I won't run back to Korea with my tail between my legs without at least trying to make this right. There was a long pause. Then, surprisingly, the king's voice softened slightly. You really love her. More than I thought possible. Another pause. Very well. You have 2 weeks. 2 weeks to determine if this relationship is salvageable. After that, with or without her, you return to Seoul. We'll address the marriage arrangement and your future then. Agreed? Agreed. After the call ended, Jae-won sat down at his desk and began to write. Not an explanation this time. An apology. A real, honest, from-the-heart apology that acknowledged everything he'd done wrong and asked for nothing in return. He wrote it by hand, on simple notebook paper, his careful handwriting filling page after page. He wrote about meeting me in the coffee shop, about the first moment he realized he was falling for me. He wrote about the terror of loving me while knowing the truth would eventually destroy what we'd built. He wrote about his regrets, his selfishness, his desperate hope that somehow, impossibly, we could find a way forward. When he finished, it was nearly midnight. He put the letter in an envelope, wrote my name on the front, and set it aside for morning. Then he did something he hadn't done in years. He prayed. Not to any specific god. The royal family maintained cultural Buddhist traditions, but he'd never been particularly religious, but to the universe, fate, whatever force might be listening. Please, he whispered into the darkness of his small apartment. Please let her find a way to forgive me. I know I don't deserve it, but please. The next morning, Sunday, I woke up in my own bed after a restless night filled with fragmented dreams of palaces and coffee shops, and Jae-won's face shifting between the man I knew and a stranger in royal robes. I reached for my phone and found 17 missed calls from an unknown international number and 3 voicemails in Korean that my phone helpfully tried and failed to translate. I also had a text from Jae-won. I won't call or show up at your work or apartment. I know you need space. But I left something for you at Brood Awakening. Sarah has it. You don't have to read it if you don't want to, but I hope you will. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it, block his number, pretend I'd never met him. But a larger part, the part that still loved him despite everything, was desperately curious. I got dressed and walked to the coffee shop, finding Sarah already there, opening up for the day. He came by at 7 this morning, she said, handing me an envelope. Looked like he hadn't slept. Said to give you this, and that he'd understand if you threw it away without reading it. Did you talk to him? Briefly. She gave me a meaningful look. He's a mess, Maya. Absolutely wrecked. Whatever he did, he knows he fucked up. Good, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. And I took the envelope home and sat with it for 2 hours before I found the courage to open it. When I finally did, Jaewon's words hit me like a physical blow. The letter started with an apology, but not the kind that made excuses. He took full responsibility for the deception, acknowledged the harm he'd caused, and didn't try to justify his choices. He explained the deal with his father, the year in America, the test of finding authentic love, but he framed it as context, not justification. Then he wrote about meeting me, about the first conversation we had, how I'd smiled at him like he was just another customer, rather than treating him with the careful deference he'd experienced his entire life. How that simple, genuine friendliness had felt revolutionary. He wrote about falling in love with me, about realizing that what had started as an experiment had become the most real thing he'd ever experienced, about the agony of knowing that every day he didn't tell me the truth was another day of betrayal, but being too terrified to risk losing me. He wrote about his regrets, not about coming to America or about meeting me, but about the lies, about underestimating my capacity to handle the truth, about thinking he could control the narrative and the timing when love never worked that way. The letter ended simply, I love you, Maya. I love you in a way that terrifies me because it's real and deep and unlike anything I've ever felt before. I love you enough to accept that you may never forgive me. I love you enough to walk away if that's what you need. But I also love you enough to fight for us if you're willing to give me that chance. Not because I'm a prince who's used to getting what he wants, but because I'm a man who's found something worth fighting for. I don't expect you to answer this today or tomorrow or even this week. I just needed you to know that every moment we shared was real. My feelings were never a performance. The man you fell in love with is who I actually am, title and wealth aside. If you decide you want to try to work through this, I'll be at our table at Brood Awakening every day at 3:30, like always. I'll wait for as long as it takes. If you decide you can't forgive this, I'll accept your decision and I'll leave Seattle. You'll never have to see me again. Either way, thank you for giving me the greatest 6 months of my life. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for loving the man I am beneath everything else. Always yours, Jaewon. I read the letter 3 times, crying through each reading. Then I called Sarah. I don't know what to do, I admitted. What does your gut tell you? That I'm still in love with him. That I hate him for lying. That I understand why he did it. That I'm furious he didn't trust me. That I want to forgive him. That I'm scared to forgive him. All of it at once. That sounds about right for love. Help me, Sarah. I need perspective. Okay. Her voice became serious. Here's what I think. He fucked up. Massively. No question. But people fuck up. The question is whether the person beneath the fuck up is worth the work of rebuilding trust. And, from everything you've told me, he is. He's kind, respectful, honest in all the ways that matter about his feelings and character. The only thing he lied about was his circumstances. That's not a small thing. No, it's not. But it's also not insurmountable if you both want to work through it. What if I can't ever trust him again? Then you'll know that when you try. But Maya, if you walk away now, you'll always wonder. You'll always question if you gave up on something real because you were too afraid to risk being hurt again. I'm already hurt. I know. But there's hurt that destroys and hurt that transforms. This could be either one. You get to decide which. After the call, I sat with my conflicted feelings. I made lists of pros and cons. I journaled pages and pages trying to work through my emotions. I called my mom, who listened patiently and then told me that only I could make this decision. 3 days passed. 3 days of Jaewon sitting alone at our table in Brood Awakening at 3:30, ordering a small black coffee and waiting. Sarah reported that he never looked at his phone, never tried to work on his laptop, just waited, hoping I'd show up. On the 4th day, I did. I walked into Brood Awakening at 3:45, 15 minutes late, wearing jeans and a hoodie, no makeup, my hair in a messy bun. I looked like I felt exhausted, emotionally raw, uncertain. Jaewon was at our table, staring out the window at the rain. When the bell above the door chimed and he looked up and saw me, his entire face transformed. Hope, fear, relief, love, all of it flashing across his features in an instant. I walked to the table and sat down across from him. "Hi," I said. "Hi." His voice was hoarse. "Thank you for coming. I read your letter. And? And I have questions. So many questions. I'll answer all of them. Honestly. No more lies. No more omissions. I swear to you." I pulled out my phone, opening a notes app where I'd been compiling questions for 3 days. Let's start with the basics. Your full name and title. Crown Prince Jaewon Hyun-soo of the Royal House of Joseon. I'm first in line for the throne. My father is King Hyun-soo Daejung. My mother is Queen Consort Min Seo. What does that mean practically? What does a crown prince actually do? He took a breath. I represent the monarchy at state functions. I'm involved in various charitable organizations and cultural initiatives. I give speeches, attend diplomatic events, serve as a symbol of national unity and cultural heritage. When I turn 30, I'll take on more governmental advisory roles. When my father passes, I'll become king. How wealthy are you? And I want actual numbers, not vague generalities. Personally, my trust fund is worth approximately 2.7 billion US dollars. That's separate from the crown properties and assets, which are significantly larger but technically belong to the state, not to me personally. I absorbed that. 2.7 billion. The number was so large it almost didn't mean anything. The apartment, the car wash job, the budgeting, that was all fake? The constraints were real, even if the underlying reason wasn't. I genuinely only had $1,500 a month to spend. I genuinely had to work to afford anything beyond basic necessities. My father wanted me to experience real financial pressure. So in that sense, what you saw was authentic, even if the backstory wasn't. What about the rest of your life here? School? Friends? I am actually taking classes at the community college. And I thought I might as well learn something useful during my time here. I don't have friends. You're the only person in Seattle I've had any genuine relationship with. What about back in Korea? Do you have a girlfriend there? A fiancé? No girlfriend. The arranged marriage my father wanted me to accept was with Lady Seoyeon Chaewon. It was purely political. I'd met her 4 times, always in formal settings. She's a lovely person, but I don't love her, and she doesn't love me. That marriage is currently on hold pending the outcome of my time here. So if we don't work out, you go back and marry her? That was the deal. His jaw tightened. But I've already told my father I won't. I'll accept whatever consequences come from refusing, but I won't marry someone I don't love. Not anymore. I looked down at my notes, trying to organize my swirling thoughts. What happens now? The press knows you're here. Your secret is out. The palace released a statement saying, "I'm in America for personal growth and academic pursuits." They're downplaying any romantic involvement. But yes, the anonymity is gone. If we were photographed together now, it would be international news. Is that what you want? For me to be thrust into that spotlight? No. His voice was firm. I never want to subject you to that without your full knowledge and consent. Which is why I need you to understand exactly what being with me would mean. He pulled out his phone, showing me articles and images. Paparazzi shots of his previous public appearances. Tabloid speculations about his personal life. Think pieces analyzing his role in the monarchy. Critical articles questioning royal expenditures. "This is my life in Korea," he said. "Constant scrutiny. Every outfit analyzed. Every word parsed for meaning. Every relationship dissected by media and public opinion. If you chose to be with me, this would become your life too." That sounds horrible. It can be, but it can also be purposeful. The platform allows for real impact on issues that matter. The charitable work I do reaches millions of people. I'm not just a figurehead. I can actually make a difference. But it comes at the cost of privacy, anonymity, the simple ability to walk down a street without being recognized. It comes with bodyguards and protocols and expectations. It means your past will be investigated, your family examined, your every choice scrutinized. He paused, his dark eyes intense. I'm not offering you a fairy tale, Maya. I'm offering you a complicated, often difficult reality that happens to come with incredible privilege and platform. You'd never want for anything material, but you'd give up many things that can't be bought. Why are you telling me all this? Are you trying to scare me away? I'm trying to be honest. For the first time. Completely honest. If you choose me, I need you to do it with full knowledge of what that choice means. I sat back, overwhelmed. This was so much bigger than I'd realized. I'd been focused on the betrayal of the lies, but the truth came with its own massive complications. I need more time, I finally said. This is too much to process in one conversation. I understand, but I'm not saying no. I'm saying I need to really think about whether I can handle what you're offering. Take all the time you need. His hand reached across the table, palm up, an invitation. And I'll be here. I looked at his hand, at the gesture that was so achingly familiar. How many times had we sat at this table, hands intertwined, talking about nothing and everything? I placed my hand in his, and the contact felt like coming home and jumping off a cliff all at once. No more lies, I said. Ever. About anything. If we're going to even attempt to work through this, that's the non-negotiable. No more lies, he agreed, I swear it. We sat there, hands connected across the table, rain streaking the windows, the familiar coffee shop humming with activity around us. I didn't know if we could make this work. I didn't know if I could forgive the magnitude of his deception. I didn't know if I was strong enough to handle the life he was offering, but I knew I wanted to try. Over the next 2 weeks, Jae-won showed me his real life in careful, measured doses. He showed me articles about his childhood, growing up in the palace, videos of his official duties, the speeches and ribbon cuttings and diplomatic functions, photos of his family, formal portraits that looked like they belonged in history books. He introduced me, via video call, to his personal secretary in Seoul, a kind woman named Ji-woo, who had been with him since he was a child. She answered my questions patiently, explaining the protocols, the expectations, the reality of royal life. He showed me his apartment as it really should be, or rather, what he could have had. He pulled up listings for luxury penthouses in Seoul's most exclusive neighborhoods, showed me the cars he owned, the properties held in his name. But most importantly, he showed me that beneath all the trappings, he was still the same person I'd fallen in love with. We went to Discovery Park, and he was still the man who could spend hours talking about everything and nothing. We cooked dinner together in his tiny apartment, and he was still terrible at chopping vegetables and made me laugh with his focused concentration on following recipe directions exactly. We watched terrible movies and quoted lines at each other and fell asleep tangled together on his narrow bed. The core of who he was hadn't changed. Only my understanding of his circumstances had, but the trust was still broken. I'd catch myself watching him, wondering if there were other secrets, if there were other lies waiting to detonate. He noticed, and it hurt him, but he never pushed. Just continued to be patient, to answer every question. To show me piece by piece that he was worth the risk. 2 weeks after our conversation in the coffee shop, on a rainy Wednesday evening, Jae-won and I were walking back to his apartment after a movie. We were debating the plot holes, laughing, completely absorbed in each other. We didn't notice the black SUVs following us until they pulled up alongside the curb. Jae-won's entire body went rigid. No. Doors opened. Men in dark suits emerged, moving with military precision. They weren't threatening, but their presence was unmistakable. Security. Royal guards. Your Highness, one of them said, bowing slightly. Your father has recalled you to Seoul. We're to escort you to the airport immediately. I'm not going, Jae-won said, his voice tight. Your Highness? I said I'm not going. Then the passenger door of the middle SUV opened, and an older man emerged. He was distinguished, powerful-looking, with Jae-won's features aged into authority and command. He wore an expensive suit and carried himself with absolute certainty. Father, Jae-won breathed. The king had come to Seattle personally. This must be Maya, the king said, his English perfect, his attention turning to me. It's a pleasure to finally meet you. My son has spoken of little else for the past 6 months. I stood there, completely frozen. I was face to face with actual royalty. With a king. A man who ruled a country and commanded respect from millions. And he was looking at me like I was some kind of interesting specimen. Your Majesty? Jaewon stepped between us. You can't just show up here and… I can, and I have. The king's tone brooked no argument. Your 2 weeks are up, Jaewon. You've determined that you still wish to pursue this relationship despite the complications. She's determined that she's willing to try. So now we move to the next phase. Next phase? I found my voice, stepping around Jaewon. What next phase? The king smiled, and it was not a warm expression. The test isn't over, my dear. My son has won your affection while pretending to be poor. Now we discover if you can handle the reality of what being with him actually means. He gestured to the SUVs. Please, both of you, get in. We're going to have a very important conversation about what the future might hold. I looked at Jaewon. He looked back at me. Conflict and apology and fear all warring in his eyes. This was it. The moment where I decided if I was all in or all out. I thought about the past 6 months, the coffee shop conversations, and the simple dates, the quiet intimacy of learning someone. The betrayal of discovering it was all based on a lie, the agony of trying to forgive, the glimpses of the real man beneath the prince. I thought about the life Jaewon was offering, the scrutiny, the pressure, the loss of privacy, but also the purpose, the platform, the ability to make a real difference, and most importantly, a future with a man who, despite his catastrophic initial deception, had shown himself to be genuinely kind, respectful, and deeply in love with me. I took a breath. Okay, I said. Let's have that conversation. Jaewon's hand found mine, squeezing gently. You don't have to do this? Yes, I do. I looked at the king, meeting his assessing gaze head on. If I'm going to make an informed decision about my future, I need all the information. So let's talk. The king's smile shifted, becoming slightly more genuine. You have courage. I appreciate that. Please, get in. We climbed into the SUV, Jaewon and I in one seat, the king across from us. The door closed, and suddenly, we were in a cocoon of leather and tinted windows, the Seattle streets rolling past outside. The king studied us for a long moment. Then he began to speak. What I'm about to tell you, Maya, will determine the course of your entire life if you choose to proceed with a relationship with my son. I need you to listen carefully and think critically. Not romantically, not emotionally, but practically. I nodded, my hand still gripping Jaewon's. If you marry my son, you will become Crown Princess of Korea. Eventually, when Jaewon ascends to the throne, you will be queen. These are not honorary titles. They come with genuine responsibilities, constant public scrutiny, and expectations that will fundamentally alter every aspect of your existence. I understand. Do you? The king leaned forward. You're American. You have no understanding of Korean royal protocol, no connection to our cultural heritage, no experience with the level of public attention you'll face. The Korean people are proud of their royal family. They have expectations. Some will welcome you. Many will question whether an American barista is appropriate to be their future queen. I felt the words like a slap, but I kept my expression neutral. Furthermore, the king continued, you'll be expected to learn Korean fluently, to understand and participate in complex cultural and religious traditions, to give up your career, your independence, your ability to make simple choices without considering their political implications. You'll live in the palace under constant watch. Your children will not be simply your children. They'll be heirs to the throne, raised according to royal protocols. He paused. You'll give up the right to privacy, to anonymity, to the simple pleasure of walking into a coffee shop without being recognized. Every aspect of your life will become public property. Your clothes will be analyzed. Your words will be parsed. Your family will be investigated. Your past will be examined in minute detail. Can you handle that, Maya? I don't know, I said honestly. I've never experienced anything like that, but I'm willing to try if it means being with Jaewon. Willingness isn't enough. The king's voice was sharp. This isn't a romantic adventure. This is a lifelong commitment to a role that will demand everything from you. If you fail, if you can't handle the pressure, if you embarrass the crown, The consequences affect not just you, but my son, the entire royal family, and the monarchies standing with the Korean people. Father? Jaewon interjected, his voice hard. That's enough. You're trying to scare her. I'm trying to ensure she understands the reality of what she's considering. The king turned back to me. I'm not being cruel, Maya. I'm being honest. My son has been honest with you about his deception. Now I'm being honest about what accepting him means. I appreciate that, I said quietly. And you're right to question whether I'm suitable. I'm not Korean. I don't know your culture or traditions. I'm completely unprepared for royal life. But I love your son. And if he thinks I'm worth the risk, then I'm willing to work as hard as necessary to be worthy of the role. The king sat back, something shifting in his expression. Jaewon, you've chosen well. She has courage, if nothing else. She has much more than courage, Jaewon said. She has integrity, intelligence, compassion, and strength. She'll be an exceptional crown princess, if you give her the chance. The king was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out a tablet, bringing up documents. Here's what I'm offering, he said. 6 months. You'll both return to Seoul. Maya, you'll live in a palace apartment, not with Jaewon, but nearby. You'll undergo intensive training in Korean language, culture, protocol, and royal duties. You'll be assigned tutors, cultural advisors, and a personal secretary. You'll make public appearances with Jaewon, allowing the Korean people to meet you and form opinions. And if I can't handle it, then you return to America with my blessing and a financial settlement that ensures you never have to work again. No hard feelings, no public shaming. We'll release a statement that the relationship ended amicably due to the pressures of royal life. And if I can handle it, then after 6 months, if both you and Jaewon still wish to marry, I'll give my official blessing. The engagement will be announced. You'll undergo further training for another year before the wedding. Then you'll become crown princess. And this will be your life, until my son becomes king, and you become queen. He looked between us. This is my final offer. Either you both return to Seoul and do this properly, with full transparency and proper preparation, or Jaewon returns alone and this relationship ends. No more hiding in Seattle. No more pretending to be ordinary people. You face the reality together, or you walk away. Choose. I looked at Jaewon. His eyes were searching mine, desperate to know what I was thinking. The choice was impossible. Return to Korea. Give up everything I knew. Try to become someone I'd never imagined being. Or walk away from the man I loved because the obstacles were too large. But as I looked at Jaewon, at the man who'd worked at a car wash and counted quarters and listened to my poetry and made love to me in a narrow bed, I realized the choice wasn't impossible at all. I'll do it, I said. I'll come to Seoul. Jaewon's expression transformed, hope and love and relief flooding his features. But, I continued, looking at the king, I have conditions. The king raised an eyebrow. Conditions? Yes. First, I need to be able to contact my family and friends freely. I won't be isolated. Second, if at any point during the 6 months I decide this isn't for me, I can leave immediately without pressure or guilt. Third, Jaewon and I maintain a relationship during this time. I'm not going through this training while being kept apart from him. Reasonable conditions, the king said. Agreed. Anything else? Yes. I leaned forward. I need you to understand that I'm not doing this to become royalty or because I'm impressed by wealth and titles. I'm doing this because I love your son, the man, not the prince. And if I succeed in this training, if I become crown princess, it will be because I've chosen this life, not because I was dazzled by crowns and palaces. I need you to respect that. And the king studied me for a long, intense moment. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. It was genuine this time, reaching his eyes. You remind me of my wife, he said. When I first met her, she had that same fire, that same unwillingness to be cowed by title or tradition. He paused. I think you might actually be able to do this, Maya Chen. I think you might be exactly what my son needs. He extended his hand. Welcome to the family, provisionally at least. I shook his hand, and the deal was sealed. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind. The king had a team that descended on my life with terrifying efficiency. They packed up my apartment, settled my lease, handled my resignation from brood awakening. They ensured my student loans were paid off, set up a financial trust for my parents, and managed 1,000 details I didn't even know needed managing. Sarah cried when I told her I was leaving. "This is insane," she said, hugging me tight. "Completely, utterly insane. You're moving to Korea to become a princess." "I know." I laughed through my own tears. "I can't quite believe it's real." "Are you scared?" "Terrified. But also excited?" "Is that weird?" "Not weird." Sarah pulled back, holding my shoulders. "You've always been braver than you thought you were. You'll be amazing at this. What if I'm not? What if I fail? Then you come home, and we go back to serving overpriced coffee and complaining about customers. But Maya, I don't think you're going to fail. I think you're going to blow them all away." I packed a single suitcase, everything else being shipped separately. I said goodbye to my apartment, to the coffee shop, and to the city that had been home for 3 years. And then, on a gray Seattle morning, I boarded a private jet with Jaewon and his father, leaving behind everything familiar. The flight to Seoul was 14 hours. The king worked on his laptop for most of it, giving Jaewon and me space. We sat in impossibly comfortable seats, attended by discreet flight staff, surrounded by luxury I'd never experienced. "Are you okay?" Jaewon asked, holding my hand. "I don't know." I looked out the window at clouds stretching to infinity. "Ask me when we land. You can still change your mind. Even now. I'll support whatever you decide." "I know. That's one of the reasons I love you." He kissed my temple. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making this up to you. The lies, the deception, all of it." I turned to face him. "You don't have to make it up to me. You just have to be honest from now on. That's all I need. I can do that." He smiled. "No more secrets. Ever." The jet landed at a private airfield outside Seoul in the early morning. As we descended, I got my first glimpse of the city, sprawling and modern and completely foreign. This was going to be home. A motorcade was waiting. More SUVs, more security, more formality. The king rode in one car. Jaewon and I rode in another. We drove through Seoul, through streets that were waking up, morning commuters filling sidewalks and roads. And then we arrived at the palace. I'd seen pictures. I'd looked at articles and videos. Nothing prepared me for the reality. The palace complex was enormous, a combination of traditional Korean architecture and more modern additions. Beautiful gardens, ornate buildings, guards in ceremonial dress, staff moving with practiced efficiency. It was breathtaking and overwhelming. "Welcome home," Jaewon said softly. "This is your home. Not mine. Not yet. It will be." He squeezed my hand. "If you want it to be." I was shown to my apartments, a suite of rooms that were larger than my entire Seattle apartment had been. Beautiful traditional furnishings mixed with modern amenities. A bedroom, a sitting room, a study, a bathroom that was practically a spa. Jiwoo, Jaewon's secretary, appeared to help me settle in. "Your training begins tomorrow," she explained kindly. "You'll have Korean language lessons in the morning, cultural studies in the afternoon, and protocol training in the evenings. It will be intense, but I'll be here to help you through it." "Thank you," I said, feeling dazed. "Get some rest." She bowed slightly. "Tomorrow will be challenging." After she left, I stood in my beautiful new prison and tried not to panic. There was a knock on the door. Jaewon appeared, having changed into more formal attire. "I thought you might need a friendly face," he said. "I do." I walked into his arms, and he held me tight. "You're going to be okay," he murmured. "Better than okay. You're going to be brilliant. I hope you're right." Over the next weeks, I was thrown into the most intensive learning experience of my life. I studied Korean language for 4 hours every morning with a patient tutor named Mr. Park, who corrected my pronunciation endlessly. I learned about Korean history, culture, art, and traditions in the afternoons with Professor Kim, a stern woman who expected excellence. I studied royal protocol in the evenings with Lady Yoon, who taught me how to bow, how to speak, how to move, how to exist in the public eye. It was exhausting. Every day I felt like I was drowning in information. The language was difficult. The cultural nuances were complex. The expectations were overwhelming. But Jaewon was there. Every evening after my lessons, he'd come to my apartments. We'd have dinner together, and he'd help me practice Korean, patiently correcting my mistakes. We'd walk through the palace gardens, and he'd tell me stories about growing up here. We'd curl up together and watch terrible Korean dramas, and he'd translate the jokes I didn't understand yet. Slowly, painfully, I improved. After 2 months, I could hold basic conversations in Korean. After 3 months, I could read and write. After 4 months, I was understanding the cultural context of the history I was learning. After 5 months, when the protocol was becoming second nature. And then came my first public appearance. It was a charity event, supporting children's literacy programs. I would appear alongside Jae-won, be introduced as his girlfriend, and make brief remarks in Korean. I was terrified. "You're going to be perfect," Jae-won assured me as we prepared. "Just be yourself. The public will love you. What if they don't? Then we'll deal with it together." The event was held at a beautiful cultural center in Seoul. Media was everywhere. Cameras flashing, reporters calling out questions. The energy was overwhelming. Jae-won kept his hand on the small of my back, a steadying presence. We walked into the venue together, and I felt hundreds of eyes assessing me. I wore a traditional hanbok that had been specially made for me, modern enough to be fashionable but traditional enough to show respect for Korean culture. My hair was styled elegantly. I'd practiced my remarks 100 times. When it was time for me to speak, I stepped up to the microphone, looked out at the crowd, and delivered my carefully prepared speech in Korean. I spoke about the importance of literacy, about how books had shaped my own life, about my gratitude for being welcome to Korea, and my commitment to supporting causes that mattered to the Korean people. When I finished, there was applause. Genuine, warm applause. I looked at Jae-won, and he was beaming at me. "Perfect," he mouthed. After the event, we read the media coverage. Most of it was positive. Some outlets questioned whether an American was appropriate for the Crown Prince, but many praised my efforts to learn Korean, my respectful dress, my obvious commitment to the role. "You did it," Jae-won said that night. "You passed your first public test." "One test." I leaned against him. "How many more to go?" He laughed. "Only about 1,000. But I'd proven something to myself. I could do this. It was hard. It was overwhelming. But I could do it." The 6-month mark approached. The king called Jae-won and me to his private study. "You've done well, Maya," he said without preamble. "Your tutors report excellent progress. Your public appearances have been well received. The people are warming to you. You've exceeded my expectations. Thank you, Your Majesty. The question is, do you still wish to proceed? Understanding fully what you're committing to?" I looked at Jae-won, then back at the king. "Yes. I want to proceed. I want to marry Jae-won. And I want to become crown princess. I want this life." The king nodded. "Then we'll announce the engagement next month. Formal ceremony in the throne room. Full media coverage. You'll become officially part of the royal family." He paused. "There's no going back after that. You understand?" "I understand." "Very well." He actually smiled. "Welcome to the family, Maya." Officially this time, the engagement announcement was a massive event. The throne room was filled with dignitaries, government officials, media representatives. I wore another traditional hanbok, this one even more elaborate, in royal colors. Jae-won placed a ring on my finger, a stunning piece with a central diamond surrounded by smaller stones, designed specifically for this moment. We stood together, while the king officially announced our engagement to the nation. I looked out at the crowd, at the cameras broadcasting this moment to millions, and I felt surreal. This was my life now. This was real. The year that followed was intense. More training, public appearances, getting to know Jae-won's family beyond his parents, cousins, aunts, uncles, all curious about the American who'd captured the crown prince's heart, learning to navigate palace politics, preparing for the wedding. Through it all, Jae-won and I grew closer. What had started as a coffee shop romance had transformed into a genuine partnership. We worked together on charitable initiatives. We presented a united front at public events. We supported each other through the challenges. And we fell more deeply in love. The wedding was scheduled for a year after the engagement announcement. It would be a multi-day affair, combining traditional Korean royal wedding ceremonies with some Western elements to honor my heritage. My parents flew in for the events, overwhelmed and proud and slightly bewildered by the whole situation. "Our baby girl is marrying a prince," my mother said, tears in her eyes. "I never imagined." "Neither did I assured her. "Trust me, this has been a wild ride." The wedding day itself was surreal. I wore a traditional wedding hanbok in stunning colors, the fabric so beautiful it looked like art. The ceremony was held in the palace's main throne room, with hundreds of guests in attendance and millions watching via broadcast. I exchanged vows with Jaewon in Korean and English, promising to love and honor him, to support him in his duties, to be a worthy crown princess. When he kissed me, officially making me Crown Princess Maya of Korea, and the throne room erupted in applause, we walked out together, hand in hand, to face our future. That was 3 years ago. Looking back, it feels like a different lifetime, and yet, it also feels like it happened yesterday. I'm writing this from my office in the palace where I work on various charitable initiatives. My Korean is fluent now. I've learned to navigate the complexities of royal life. I've grown to love this country and its people. Jaewon and I have a son, Crown Prince Minho, who's 18 months old and already showing signs of his father's intelligence and his mother's stubbornness. We're expecting a daughter in 4 months. Life is good. Complicated and sometimes overwhelming, but good. I still think about that coffee shop in Seattle sometimes. About the man in the worn hoodie who counted quarters and ordered small black coffee. About falling in love with someone I thought was struggling to make ends meet, only to discover he was royalty. The deception still stings when I think about it. The lies still hurt. But I understand now why Jaewon did what he did. He needed to know if someone could love him for who he was, not what he represented. And I did. I do. Yesterday, I was organizing some old boxes when I found that worn leather wallet Jaewon used to carry in Seattle. Inside was a crumpled coffee shop receipt from our first real conversation and a folded piece of paper. I opened the paper to find a handwritten note in Jaewon's careful script. "First real smile from Maya today. She has no idea who I am." And that makes her smile worth more than all the bowing and protocol in the world. I think I could fall in love with this woman. I think I already am. It was dated the day after we first spoke in the coffee shop. I took the note to find Jaewon. He was in his office, reviewing documents, crown prince duties that never ended. "Look what I found," I said, showing him the note. He read it, and his expression softened. I'd forgotten about that. "You fell in love with me that early? Maybe earlier?" He pulled me into his lap. That first smile, that first genuine, friendly smile without any agenda behind it. I was done for. "You were such an idiot," I said affectionately. "Lying to me for 6 months. The biggest idiot." He kissed my temple. "But somehow, you forgave me." Somehow, I agreed. He touched my growing belly gently. "Do you ever regret it? Choosing this life?" I thought about it honestly. Sometimes I miss the simplicity, the anonymity, being able to walk into a coffee shop without security. But no, I don't regret it. This life is challenging, but it's also purposeful and meaningful. And I get to spend it with you. So no regrets. Even about the lies? Even about those. Because they led us here. To this moment. This family. This life. You made a terrible choice in how you approached finding love. But you found it anyway. We found each other. He held me close, and we sat there in his office, Crown Prince and Crown Princess of Korea, two people who'd met over cheap coffee and somehow built a life together against impossible odds. Sometimes the best love stories start with the worst decisions. Sometimes the greatest deceptions lead to the deepest truths. Sometimes a prince has to pretend to be poor to find something real. And sometimes, a barista from Oregon ends up becoming royalty because she fell in love with a man who counted quarters. This is our story, the crown prince who lied and the woman who forgave him. The impossible romance that somehow became the foundation of a real, lasting partnership. It's messy and complicated and not at all a fairy tale, but it's ours. And I wouldn't change a single thing. Well, maybe one thing. Next time, Jaewon, just tell the truth from the beginning. It'll save everyone a lot of heartache. He laughs and promises, knowing full well that without the lies, we might never have found each other at all. And that's the complicated truth about love. Sometimes it finds you in the most unexpected ways, through the most imperfect means, and changes your entire life. I thought I was dating a struggling student who worked at a car wash. Turns out I was falling in love with a prince who was brave enough to give up everything to find something real. And now, 3 years later, we're building a kingdom together. Not just the literal kingdom of Korea, but the small, sacred kingdom of family, partnership, and a love that survived deception to become something genuine and true. The black SUVs, the bowing guards, the revelation of his royalty, all of it nearly destroyed us. But love, real love, is stronger than lies. And our love, born in a coffee shop over a $2 cup of coffee, proved strong enough to survive crowns and palaces and the weight of an entire nation's expectations. So here's to the poor students who are actually princes. Here's to the baristas who become princesses. Here's to love that transforms, transcends, and ultimately triumphs. This is our story, and it's only just beginning.